So continuing into the next rule, we're going to return to the same model we looked at previously and use the general intersection rule. We're now going to go and configure the component distance rule to do a different type of check. So what I need is in the views to switch on classification. And I'll take this and dock it to the side of the screen. Quite often when we're working here, there's a lot to display on screen to be able to configure the various different parts of the parameters or use the classifications for filtering, etc. So there's a lot going on just now. When we're actually working, all of this will be switched off and we just have these views on the left-hand side. But let's just go click on our component distance. I renamed it earlier to ensure wash hand basins are no more than 800 mil from WC, and that's what we're about to do. So that tells us what we need to do. So with this rule, you'll see, if I just briefly switch back to the general intersection rule, you'll see the interface is different. And that's true for pretty much all of the rules. There are some that are similar, but they do many, many different varied things. So in this one, first thing I want to do is just choose what type of check it is I want to do. So is it horizontal between footprints? Is it the shortest distance? Is it directly above or below? So something like probably directly below. And if we do bottom to top, that sort of scenario there, what that would allow us to do is check if we have a suspended cable tray, make sure that there's enough space for a human hand to be able to access and get in and maintain, make changes, whatever it is that's done inside cable trays. There's a whole variety of different things. So I'm just going to return to this horizontal distance between footprints. And in this case, or with all of the cases, we've got the choice of do we want a maximum distance or a minimum distance. So a minimum distance gives us the option for effectively setting an exclusion zone around components. So another example actually might be the shortest distance between shapes. In regions of the world where earthquakes are a problem, we can isolate all of the structural components and make sure that they have a minimum clearance around them so that in the event of an earthquake, if the structure moves, it doesn't hit any critical components like gas pipes or water or electrics and cause further damage beyond the shaking of the building. So that's another example. But if we return to this one, in our case here, what we're saying is that the WC and the wash hand basin have got to be within 800 mil. So the maximum distance, in this case, that's permitted between the components is going to be 800. We then need to come down and actually choose what these components are going to be. So I'm going to use the classification that I brought in earlier called plumbing fixtures. And if I just select that classification, the view will change to show the components that we're dealing with. And on the left-hand side, I want to pick the WCs. So I'm going to pick a WC and pretty much drop down into this list. I'll use the classification this time, and I'm going to grab this whole thing and drag and drop into the left-hand side. So the source is going to be a WC, and then on the right-hand side, if I grab a basin, we'll grab WHB from here, we'll drag and drop that into place. And then a little trick with this rule is the template is set for a default minimum match of 2 items. So for every WC, there must be 2 wash hand basins. That's not what I'm trying to achieve here. So I'm going to change that to 1. And then we can go check. And we'll see a couple of things. So this one, I've deliberately picked this because it's got a couple of things just to pick up to make you aware of. So we've gone and run that, and we can see that we have one result. If we drop down in here, we can see what it actually says. And it tells me the components are not close enough. So if I go and look at this, and I'm very deliberately setting the view to be something like that, if you remember when I picked on the classification, there were actually 2 identical rooms here, one for men, one for women, and they have the same configuration of a WC and a wash hand basin. Clearly this fails because the minimum distance, or the actual distance, is 1204, which exceeds 800, but I would expect to see the same result over here. So this is an extra little filter that we can apply to the rule where I can say this rule and this check applies within the same space or the space group. But in this case, it's the space because I want it to be inside each one of these rooms. So if I run the check again, this time I get 2 results, which is what I expect. The reason I didn't get it first time is in this example here, when it checks 800 mil around the WC, if we don't have the space activated, then it finds the wash hand basin in the other room. So technically it's within the distance, but it's in a different room and you have to pass through 2 doors to get to it. So that's not acceptable. So this is now the correct result. The only other bit that I need to check actually is when we go and look at this, if I check my filters and we just zoom slightly, you'll see I've got 2 WCs and I've actually got 4 wash hand basins. So there is actually, it's a little oddity in this file because it's been saved out of different versions of ArchiCAD at some points in its life. The WCs, 2 of them are actually, if we go to the info tool, 2 of them are actually distribution elements. And then these 2 down here, if I drag and drop, are actually objects. So now I've got all 4 as part of the rule. So it's always worth checking that the source and the target components are exactly what you expect. Other ways we can achieve this, we can go and rewrite this so it's just include any that have a classification called WC, but if we want to use drag and drop, we can pull in both lines. And now when I run the check, this time we get the final result, which is 2 that fail, and there are actually underneath this, if we go up here, there are 2 components which have passed, which are the first and second floor WCs because they're within the required distance. So that's another example of a rule. There's many, many other ways that we can use this same rule for different configurations for other scenarios, etc. But hopefully that gives you a taster of a couple of little rules in Solibri.